Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia. It's time for Friday Reads. I think it's like the, oh my gosh, 17th? Is that what it is? I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, I hope you've had a great reading week. I'm going to share mine with you now, and you can share yours with me in the comments down below. Before we get to the books, a quick recap of the week in viewing. It sounds like we watched a whole lot of TV, but really it just was things that, I don't know, it was spread out. We only watched like one or two episodes of something a night, so, but somehow over the course of the week, it sounds like we watched a lot of shows. So we're still watching Shrinking, which is on Apple TV, which is really funny. I mean, the dialogue is great. If I think that some of the creators of Ted Lasso are making this show, and it does have that same kind of feel where it is really funny, it's really witty. The characters are very appealing. Everybody likes just screwing up and trying to fix it, and different kinds of relationships are formed. Anyway, we like it. And then we did see the movie Glass Onion, which was funny, it was cute, it was fluffy. It wasn't as good as Knives Out, but it was enjoyable and it moved along briskly enough that you didn't think about the plot holes, especially one enormous impractical consideration until you got to the very end of the movie. So it was fun. If you like the first one, you'll probably like it. And then we saw Landscapers, which is a British kind of a four-part, I guess you call it a limited series, and it is a true crime story. And I never heard of this crime, but maybe if you're from the UK, this is like more common knowledge. It's about a couple who, from the beginning that they get convicted of murdering her parents, and then the whole story is kind of what happened from their point of view and what the police think happened. But it's not like a dry true crime reenactment. It's kind of an artistic presentation, and it had Olivia Colman and David Thewlis, and Will Sharp directed it, and he kind of honed in on the Olivia Colman's character's obsession with old movies, old westerns and romances, and he stages a lot of the scenes of the movie in those styles. So there's like some fourth wall stuff. So it was really cool, and the acting was great because two of our favorite actors were in it. So we enjoyed that a lot. And since we'd never heard of that story, it was interesting. And then we have started watching The Last of Us on HBO, which, I don't know, we can't seem to pass up a post apocalyptic nightmare. So we're watching this show, and I don't know anything about the game that it is based on, but it is, the idea here is that the story actually takes place around now, but 20 years ago there was a huge pandemic based on a fungus that has been figured out how to hop into human host. And the fungus, if you are bit by someone, it's got a zombie aspect. And so if you're bit by somebody with the fungus, it takes you over very quickly, and then you're kind of part of the fungus network or whatever. So in a matter of just a couple of days, the world is just completely eradicated, basically. But then there are people who have survived. The fungus isn't gone either, so it's a never-ending threat, and there's no cure or prevention of it, just like avoiding it or killing the zombies. And so anyway, the story is that this guy, that we start with his backstory, but his job is to transport this teenage girl who, it'll spoil it if I tell you what's so important about her, but he has to help get her from point A to point B through this nightmare landscape. So far so good. We're enjoying it. All right, this channel is about books, so let's talk about books. I have been reading a few different things this week. When last we spoke, I had just started Dr. No by Percival Everett, and I did read the rest of this book. This book is, it's super goofy. Okay, it's one of the silliest books I've ever read. It's very funny at times. But I will confess that some of the shtick and the nature of the jokes did start to wear on me about three-fourths of the way through the book. So, this is the third book I've read by Everett, and the trees being the one that's sort of the gold star for me, the gold standard, and then telephone, which I enjoyed a lot. And trees and telephone were really, really different from one another, with trees kind of combining the kind of madcap humor and goofy aspect with a police procedural, and then some very dark social satire and commentary on police brutality, crimes against people of color. Just a lot of things came together in that book. And then Telephone was really different. It wasn't funny at all. It was very sad. It's just a really, and depending on which version of the story, it's kind of sad and sadder. Like, I realized that I got a version of the story. There's three different versions of Telephone, and I got the one I've read the alternate endings, and I might not have felt the same about it if I had read one of the other versions. So that was a whole different experience. And then this is like a third experience. So I don't know, if I read 20 Percival Everett books, do I get 20 different experiences? But here we have all of the goofy madcap humor and really not a lot of anything else. So basically there's a mathematician professor guy named Walla Kitu, whose name means nothing nothing basically. But we find out that his real name was Ralph, and that as a child he's a character in a former book of Percival Everett's called Glyph. So, but Kitu is contacted by a crazy billionaire who wants to break into Fort Knox, and he doesn't really care about the gold, but he wants to steal a box of nothing, and the nothing he wants to harness into some sort of super crazy James Bondish weapon. And the whole thing is a big parody of James Bond movies and villains. And I feel like I was in an uphill battle here because I don't really care about James Bond movies, and I really, really don't care about advanced mathematics. So the amount of energy that was put into crazy James Bond villain escapades and settings, and then all of the asides that kind of devolve into discussions of mathematical and physics equations and things. I mean, I was just kind of like, whoop, a whole lot of the time. I was here for the funny dialogue and some of Walla Kitu's strange inner workings. So this was a guy he's 36 years old. He has this very limited life. He teaches his classes and he thinks about mathematical equations. He has a one-legged dog that he carries around in a baby carrier. And when he's sleeping, he and the dog have conversations where he works out problems in his life or just mathematical stuff he wants to think about in conversation. And that's about it. He's never driven a car. He doesn't have any relationships. He's a virgin. He's not worried about any of these things, but he's just not interested in them. His little sphere of life is what he's interested in. He wants to sit around and think about nothing, which is his specialty. Which is not nothing like he's not doing anything, but like nothing is a concept. And the villain is trying to steal a box of nothing out of Fort Knox. And this doesn't make sense and I can't explain it any better, but maybe you'll understand it if you read this book. So there's a lot of conversations in this book that are kind of like who's on first routines with the word nothing in them. Like, what do you study? I study nothing. What do you mean you study nothing? Well, nothing is something. Nothing is everything. Nothing is nothing. This kind of stuff goes on. And that's kind of wore on me after a while. I was like, okay, ha ha. But sometimes people get caught up in their own humor and they just can't stop. But and then there's if you remember from the trees with the funny names, this happens in here too. There's people that either have just goofy names or they have names that are somebody else, but that's not them. So early on in the story, Walla Kitu kind of flags himself by depositing a huge amount of money in his bank account, and the feds keep following up and trying to investigate him. So in their first encounter, a man breaks into his home and to question him and said, and this is very early on, so it's not a spoiler, but he says, the man who's broken in says, "My name is Bill Clinton." I looked at him, head tilted. Not that Bill Clinton. He had seen my questioning expression before. "I work for a government agency, but I can't tell you which one." "It's top secret," I guessed. "Yes, sirree, Bob." "FBI? No, that's not secret." "CIA? No." "NSA? No." "DOD? No." "DOA? DEA? No." "EPA? PTA? NRA? CNN? "You'll never get it," Clinton said. "I've only started. Given that there are 26 letters in the alphabet and that there is no reason for me to assume that your agency has 3 initials but could have 1, 2, 3 of 26, then I have 37 million more guesses coming to me. So let's start again. A. Shut up," he barked. "You're a Weisenheimer." So this is kind of the flavor of the conversations in this book. Wallakitu gets off on these nerdy mathematical riffs and people get exasperated. I had fun reading it. I got a little tired of it partway through, but then the very, very ending, I liked it. I was excited to learn from one of my viewers who I certainly cannot pronounce their YouTube name, but here it is. You can look and see in the comments of my last video that they shared that Percival Everett's next book is going to be a retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of Jim. And that book is going to be titled James. And I also found out that it's not going to be published by Grey Wolf Press. It went up to auction, or, you know, however that works with publishing, and it's going to be published by Doubleday. So I'm expecting it'll get, you know, the bigger press, you know, maybe the hardcover, you know, edition and all of that. So that's coming like in about a year. So I'm really excited about that. I mean, that's giving me trees energy for sure. I think that's going to be really amazing. All right, so that was my Percival Everett experience. And my question, viewers, is what should I read next of Percival Everett? He's written so many books. Of course, I was unaware of any of this until last year, but I was thinking maybe So Much Blue, but let me know if that's a good choice or if there's something else that I should pursue instead, because I'll probably have to buy it. I think the library might have 1 or 2 of his older books. But so let me know if you have a recommendation for further reading of Percival Everett while I wait for James to come out. All right, so then we got into the time machine and we went way back, way back to Shakespeare. And I read Hamlet. Now, maybe you thought when I put Hamlet in my TBR, she is not going to read that. Well, dear readers and viewers, I did indeed read Hamlet. And I'll tell you, you know, I have not read Shakespeare since the dawn of the internet. And it really did improve the reading experience to be able to stop and instantly look things up while I was reading. So this is probably not a newsflash to anyone who's been reading older classics lately, but you know, the footnotes, they're not really sufficient. They just kind of clarify the exact meaning of certain phrases, but I like to stop and have a little side, you know, I want to read like an article or stuff like that. So, you know, at various points where I'm thinking, wait a minute, the way I'm interpreting the scene, is that a thing? Is that what's going on here? And then I can look that up and see if, you know, what people said about this scene, like what's going on with Ophelia and Hamlet or whatever. So I enjoyed that a lot, just to be able to stop and have those little side pieces. I guess, you know, like if you were in class, you'd have a discussion, but I'm sitting and reading it by myself. So I want to see what other people say about different scenes and relationships and plot points while I'm reading the play. I was also surprised how fast it went. Like, I don't know, I thought it was going to be this really long, slow slog, and it only took a couple of days. Like, the play was a lot shorter than I remembered. But I enjoyed it again. I'm always struck by just the beauty of the language, the immense number of phrases and sentences that are in our common dialogue. How many things in Hamlet are the title of some other book? Hamlet himself, of course, he's perennially, yeah, perennially annoying in his, he's just such a procrastinator. I understand at the beginning that he, this ghost pops up and says, hey, I'm your dad and here's how I was murdered and you need to go, kill your uncle. I understand you'd want to like slow down and check the veracity of these claims before you did anything. But, once he was satisfied with that, he just made it so complicated. And, we all know what the result was. But the question of his age still perplexes me because he comes off. They say he's a student, so you're thinking 20ish, and then later on in the conversation in the graveyard, it's like 30ish, and I don't know that what his age is kind of makes a difference to me because his behavior is very 20. His hot temper, his inconsistency, his getting all geared up to do this big thing and then kind of like piddling around and not really doing it, dragging things out, making things super complicated. And that kind of fits with 20. If he's 30 and he's still acting like that, is he like a case of arrested development? Is that why, Laertes and Polonius are telling Ophelia, like, steer clear. He's not gonna get it together and marry you. Whatever you do, don't sleep with him. That kind of explains some other things about him. So I don't know. I don't know what most scholars have come to decide about that. If you have an opinion, let me know. And the other thing that always bugs me in this play every single time is Ophelia. She just really disappoints me because she, at the beginning, she seems like she's really on the ball. She's got, what I always wish is when Hamlet confides in Horatio, I wish he also confided in Ophelia and that, they could have formed like a trio to figure out the deal with Claudius and, the murder and all that. And instead he cuts her out. He puts on the crazy show and everything and dumps her. So that I find that disappointing, and also that her response to troubled times, like I understand it's traumatizing for your father to be abruptly killed and your boyfriend dumps you, but does that make you instantly lose your mind? I guess my problem's really with Shakespeare, not with Ophelia herself, since she's fictional. But I don't know. I always just felt like we could have done more with Ophelia. It's kind of a letdown. But anyway, it was fun to read it once again. At the end, where Horatio is just left like, oh gosh, how am I going to explain all this? Anyway, I enjoyed it. So now I don't know why that I stopped reading plays. I used to read plays a lot, like all through school, undergraduate and graduate. I was, English student, and I took a lot of classes that were reading of drama classes, which I love to do, but somehow I stopped. And I have a ton of it here at home in my library, and maybe this is like, we'll creak the gate back open and I will start reading plays again, because I really did enjoy this experience of reading Hamlet, especially with my trusty phone nearby to Google things constantly. It really helped. So after I finished Hamlet, I finally started last night reading something that I have been talking about for months, and it's been sitting here, and finally I started reading The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. And I only started last night, so I'm like on page 49. So in case you are unaware, this is the story of Lucretia de Medici, a real person from history. And the tragic thing is that she died right before she turned 16. And so there's a historical note, which is at the very beginning before the story starts. So this is not a spoiler, but it says, in 1516, 15-year-old Lucretia di Cosimo de' Medici left Florence to begin her married life with Alfonso II d'Este, Duke of Ferrara. Less than a year later, she would be dead. The official cause of her death was given as putrid fever, but it was rumored that she had been murdered by her husband. So at the very opening of this book, we have young Lucretia, not yet 16, and she has been married to her husband for almost a year, and that he has brought her out to an isolated, well, he told her it was a hunting lodge, but she feels like it doesn't really seem like a lodge. And she realizes that she's pretty much alone with him out here. And that's when she thinks to herself, oh my gosh, he's planning to kill me. And we don't know why she thinks that. And then the scene starts to go back in time, all the way back to her conception. So it's going to alternate between the two of them at this lodge and then her life story up to this point. And so it's tragic from the start, knowing that she is going to die. And, you know, as soon as you start reading it, I was already like kind of upset and angry about this, because the portrait that's unfolding of the child is of a really intense, brilliant, gifted little girl. She's born super intense and sensitive. She's a screamer. She is strong-willed, and she has a really keen intellect that, of course, is completely undervalued or not noticed at all by her large family. There's a zillion kids, and of course, being super intense and gifted is not particularly a prized quality for young women of the time period. So that's where we start the story. We're going to go through her childhood, I guess, and get up to this point of whatever it is that happens here with her husband. But we know from the beginning that she was a handful and did not want to marry this guy. So I will keep you posted on my progress there. The other thing I'm reading that I'm in progress with is 6 stories by E.M. Forster called The Celestial Omnibus, and that is on Project Gutenberg. This is the Forster read-along that I am participating in, and this month is the short stories of E.M. Forster. And so I talked about The Machine Stops, which I absolutely love. That story. It's one of my new favorite short stories. And I'm about halfway through the stories in the Celestial Omnibus, so I'm going to save most of my comments about them for next week. But what I will say is I'm very surprised about the nature of his short fiction that I have read so far. Now, he has one or two different collections of his short stories that some people, I think, are reading that I don't have access to. And so be interesting to hear what those short stories are like. But, I was expecting something more traditional. I thought that they would be like shorter bits like his novels. I was looking for, stuffy and repressed folks, and maybe a free spirit passing through here and there, and tedious vacations and things like that. But instead, it's kind of I've gotten some science fiction, a little fantasy, a little magic realism. Quite a departure, and there were some stuffy British people in these stories, and some of them though. So I'll let you know my overall thoughts after I've read the whole collection of the 6 stories. All right, that's my summary of the week in reading. What have you been up to? What are you reading? Let me know your thoughts or opinions on any of these books and stories and plays that I've talked about. If there is a accessible film version of Hamlet that's a really good one that you know about, let me know, because I've never seen a production of Hamlet, but now having read it again, I kind of would like to. So that's a question I'd like the answer to, and anything else you feel like chiming in on. Other than that, that's about it. We are, I don't know what we're doing this weekend. It's cold here, which means it's like the high is like 60 and we're freezing, because it was like 80, no, well, 80-ish a couple of days ago, and then there was an Arctic plunge, and now it's like 60 degrees for the next couple of days. which is below our comfort level. I know it's super wimpy, but that's how we feel. I did get a laugh the other day because I was reading some local news story, and there's a residential street in this city called Arctic Circle. So some city planner really had a sense of humor naming a street here on the coast Arctic Circle. But anyway, I digress. Have a wonderful week. I hope that you are cozy and warm and reading a good book. I will talk to you again soon. Bye bye.